Welcome back to the attic. Welcome, welcome. Nice to see you. How are you? It's been a while since it's just been you and me up here in the attic, chatting away with a glass of wine. Oh, I'm getting stuck into this already. We're going to the Languedoc today, and I tell you what, there's going to be fact-filled because we're going to learn why it's called the Languedoc, why it's so good, and we're going there with Domaine Paul Mas. And Paul Mas, well, it's actually Jean-Claude Mas. Paul Mas was his dad. And right out of the gate, there's a fact thing for you. What do we call it? It's not a factoid. Apparently that's something kind of different, like a factorello. A factorini. Mas, I'm pretty certain, is the Occitan word, or Occitan word, for a chateau. And you get them from sort of Monte Carlo right the way across to Barcelona. And that's because, as we're going to discover, people spoke this language, Occitan, from which we get the name Languedoc, all the way across that sort of swathe of the middle of sort of Europe, really, of kind of Romance Europe. And I'm pretty certain, so you get a Mas around Barcelona, and you also get a Mas in sort of Monte Carlo, right the way across. And we're right in the middle of those two in the Languedoc. And I'm going to tell you what we're drinking straight away. This is from Waitrose, £9.39. This is Paul Mas Reserve Languedoc 2019. It's a blend. It says on the front we've got Vermentino, Marsanne and Grenache Blanc. There are lots of these blends, and this is what's really exciting about the Languedoc. Aromatic, fresh, white peach. There's a sort of spice to this as well. Aromatically spicy. And they're sort of rich and sort of fleshy whites. This is quite a substantial wine. You could have this with interesting bits. I was looking up what we should have this with, and apparently one of the things is that if you get pork belly and you can rub it with spices, and you cook a pork. Ooh, that sounds good. You end up with this nice combination of this. When I say sweet fruit, I don't mean it's an off-dry wine, bone-dry wine, but this ripe, sun-kissed fruit. And one of the reasons why there are blends here, you get blends for different reasons in different parts of the world. You go to Bordeaux, part of the reason if you have a blend there is that the weather changes so much from year to year, you're never quite sure what you're going to get. It's like a box of chocolates. But you know that you might have an early ripening variety like Merlot, which comes in, but you might have late ripening varieties like Petit Verdot, and they kind of balance each other out around the core of Cabernet Sauvignon. Down here it's beautifully ripe all the time, so you get these amazing, beautiful sort of weathers. It's a wine-growing wonderland, it's absolutely fabulous, but what you can do is use different grape varieties that contribute different things to go and provide different parts of the blend. So you might get one that's kind of got a nice seam of acidity in it, and something else that's aromatic, and something else that gives more fleshy fruit, and then you bring them together to create a complete whole. And you know, the sum of the parts is worth more than each of the individual components. And this is what the Languedoc does really well, and it's what Paul Mas, Domaine Paul Mas, Jean-Claude Mas does particularly well, because that's kind of his thing. I'm going to read you a quote. This is why you should go to the Languedoc. This is from a book, The Wines of the Languedoc, which I'm enjoying at the moment. I was reading it the other day by Rosemary George, brilliant master of wine. She's kind of a real specialist on this area. And she said, why write about the Languedoc now? Now, this came out last year. She said, quite simply and without exaggeration, it is the most exciting wine region in the whole of France. The pace of change in the past few years has been breathtaking, largely led by states like this, actually. And for that reason, I have chosen to concentrate on the Languedoc of the 21st century and on the new wine growers who are behind those changes. Well, we couldn't have chosen anybody better, because he inherited from Paul Mas this quite modest estate. And Domaine Paul Mas started in the year 2000, and Jean-Claude Mas, he received 35 hectares at the end of the 1990s, and he's now built that up to, I think it's 860 hectares. So it's grown enormously, and it's got all these estates all dotted around the sort of 5 main valleys of the Languedoc, these sort of main wine-growing valleys. And Jean-Claude apparently has this rule that he won't buy more estates that are more than 15 minutes from a motorway. Was it 15 kilometres from a motorway? Because he has to get round them all. So he needs to make sure they're all reasonably close to those great southern French motorways. So he jumps into all of them, and he can go and visit them all. It's a brilliant producer. It's moving away. It should all be organic in 2023. I read somewhere, and I always love talking about this. Rather than using insecticides, he uses sexual pheromones for sexual frustration. Was it sexual confusion? That's me. So he's got a lot of sexually confused insects. Well, you put pheromones on, and then the insects don't know whether it's men or women there, and so they either disappear. It sort of sends them away because they go elsewhere for their mates rather than eating the grapes. Anyway, that's a gorgeous white. You should have that with interesting spice dishes. I know we often talk about meaty things, so you can have this with interestingly spiced vegetarian dishes, but I can't think of one off the top of my head. There's a nice mouthfeel to it. It's sort of rich, without being, it's not cloying, but it's got rich glow to the mouthfeel. That's delicious, lovely zest to it. Now, next here, over here we've got Paul Mas Malbec 2019, and it says Vinus? Vinus? Does it say Vinus on it? I'm going to hold this up. It is Vinus, and I did read about this. Vinus is the heron. This is a sort of pet heron, who's the mascot. Now this is Malbec, as in Argentine Malbec, but one of the nice parts about this range is that Jean-Claude says he's got a sort of foot in the old and the new world. And I think this is the sort of idea that the old world and the new world should not be great rivals who are sort of standing, shouting at each other across the barricades. They've actually got lots to learn from each other. And Argentina has learnt so much with Malbec, it can now, some of those lessons can come back into France and can be integrated into French winemaking. And we know people love Malbec. Now this is different from Argentine Malbec, completely different in a way. Although it shares some, so there's a lovely fruit. In a way, it is a brighter fruit. There's more red fruit, I think, in this. It's called cotte sometimes in the south of France. It is a different, earthier freshness. So if you like Argentine Malbec, this is a great way to go for something that's maybe, it's a little more loose-limbed, lissom. It's not quite so inky and dark and Argentine. This is more French and relaxed and taking easy and playing ball. And often wines can reflect the people who make them. It's extraordinary. That's why we love wine so much, because it has this ability to do that, to charm us. And this has a kind of Gallic charm. There's still that fruit skin tang that you get in Malbec, that you may know from elsewhere. It's still got this, I'll describe it, blackcurrant and... I always think with Malbec, it's like a sort of a picture that's drawn with a sort of soft lead pencil. I mean, there's something that's graphitey about it anyway, but also, you know, when you get people and they paint with, or they draw with a soft lead pencil, and there's sort of smudgy feeling. You get your fist and you can kind of smudge it across, and it creates interesting textures that way. I get that. I'm probably describing it in a really mad way, but it's like drawing with a soft leaded pencil, both in the smell, which has a kind of graphitey touch, but also in its mouthfeel and its texture. What are we going to have that with? Traditionally in the south of France, you have it with things like Megger sausages and magret de canard. I do quite like magret de canard, but not on my diet. And actually it would go really well with those. But you know, you can enjoy this with steaks. Just have it with steaks. It's a brilliant sort of steaky wine. Spaghetti bolognese, brilliant. Absolutely amazing match for that. Really gorgeous. It's quite meaty. I tell you one thing you can do with it is to go and have sort of, I know we talk a lot about that, but it's sort of about meats and things, but roasted vegetables, particularly mushroomy dishes. Really gorgeous and sort of mushroomy dishes. Be delicious with that. I'm making lots of Japanese soups at the moment. Be nice with a Japanese soup, because the sort of umami soy sauce bit, and there's lots of veg in them. That would work well together. I'm doing one tonight with fillet steak. Not very much, because it's bloody expensive, but thinly sliced fillet steak, just quickly flashed on and put in. I'm really liking it. Now, I promised to tell you about the Languedoc. De Vulgaris Eloquentia I think it was called. It was a book by Dante, and I think he wrote it in exile, and he tried to come up with a theory of the languages of Europe. So he talks about how there's Germanic languages up the top, going to Sweden and Norway, they're all kind of Germanic, indeed English. And then you had Greek, spoke all their languages, but the Romance languages, he sort of said, were all around Italy, Spain, France, Portugal. But he divided them into three. And he divided them on the basis of the words, the way they said yes, and how those yeses came to be. So, up in the north, people said oui, and it came from hic iliud, I think it meant, which was there it is. And down in the south, people said si, which came from sick, as in like that. I think that's correct. In the middle, people said ock, and that came from using the word hock. I'm pretty certain that was it, hoc iliud, hock, and sick. Anyway, so you got the people who say at the top, people who say si at the bottom, and the long de ock in the middle, because they said ock to say yes. And it becomes the Languedoc, and that's where it gets its name from, is because it's the Languedoc, because it sits in between. And there's this language called Occitan, and Occitan actually spans into northern Spain, and it goes right the way across. So roughly sort of Barcelona-ish to Monte Carlo is the language of where they say Oc. Now, of course, the one bit that's got it is the Languedoc that sits in the middle. And people are very proud Occitan speakers. You look it up, it's quite different from French. Quite different. And so that's where the name comes from. That is a dinner party anecdote that you can use when you are serving. What have we got here? Domaine Paul Mas Clos Savignac 2018 from Chateau Paul Mas. So this is one of the best wines. It says Grès de Montpellier. Montpellier, old Roman city, and indeed I think early Greek stuff. People have been planting vines down here for a very long time. You know, sort of well BCE, like sort of 5th, 6th century, I think, BCE by the Greeks, then the Romans come in, and so on. Now, this is a blend of one of my favourite blends, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre, which you will recognise is the blend in sort of Côte de Rhône. And things like Châteauneuf-du-Pape is broadly based on that. And that gives you a hint of what it's like. This is £18 from Soho Wine Supply, and this is seriously classy stuff. Beautifully integrated oak straight away, and I can tell this is a much more serious wine. You know, we've talked about balance, length, intensity, complexity sometimes when we've talked about wine before. This has all of those three. I love that Malbec. Wednesday night, boom, done it, in front of the telly. Watch Perry Mason at the moment, Matthew Reese's new series, great with that. This, I'm saving this for Saturday evening. Now, Grenache is quite juicy, and if this was all syrup, it'd be quite intense. It gives it this juicy, earthy character. Mourvèdre can be a little bit wild, and it's got that tang to it, and it gives it this zesty lift, which I can feel now on my palate. Oh, it's very, very bright and perky. And then in the middle, you've got this peppery, blackcurrant scented line of Syrah. The Grenache sort of softens it and makes it a bit more approachable. That is properly serious wine. You don't have this with roast lamb, like herby roast lamb. In fact, there's a thing I sometimes do where you just get a big baking tray and you chop up peppers and onions and potato. It's not a very sort of posh dish. All sorts of interesting bits of veg. You toss them all in olive oil with some rosemary, bit of salt. I know I probably shouldn't. And basil, some oregano and things, but sort of lots of herbs. You scatter them over a baking tray and you just roast them for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. If you want to add in a sort of meaty element, you can put in cubes of chicken as well. So the potato wants to be about the size of a dice, chicken a bit bigger, the rest of it all that kind of size. That and this, what a dreamy dish. And if you serve it with romesco sauce, look it up, sort of pimento and almond sauce, that would be magical. And that is probably sort of Occitan, because although it's based in France, in Languedoc, you're also bringing these wider Occitan flavours from places like northern Spain. That really is delicious. This is Vino di Contemplazione. You can sort of sit and contemplate this for a little bit longer. Now, if you want to go and try, as I'm sure you do, some delicious foods, go to Chateau Paul Mas, which is Jean-Claude's restaurant in the Languedoc. And incredibly, it's amazingly good value. I know this because I knew somebody who went, so it was really good value. Anyway, they asked him, this is very good value, and he said yes, because we don't make any money out of it at all. We do it to go and show how the food and the wine all kind of matches together. So go and visit Chateau Mas down in the Languedoc. And there you have, you're straddling the new world and the old. Very old world, very new world. Blends, single variety. These are you get that sense they're much more sort of Languedoc, they're much more Aquitaine, and it's that sense of bringing together all these different component parts into a glorious whole. You know what? Mrs. F is cooking something downstairs, and I can smell it. And I think I might take one of these bottles down and get stuck in. Because I've been working quite hard today, believe it or not, before now. £18, Soho Wine Supply. $8.25 in Morrisons. I don't think I told you that before. It's $8.25 in Morrisons. $9.39 in Waitrose. What a lineup that is. Delicious. So get yourself into the world of the Languedoc. Whilst you're doing it, give Rosemary Book a buy. It is an absolute cracker. It is the Infinite Ideas Classic Wine Library. Rosemary George, Wines of the Languedoc. On what was her line? Without reservation, quite simply and without exaggeration, the most exciting wine region in the whole of France. Wine and books. It's the way forwards. Come back next week. We'll have more interesting wines. We will have more bizarre stories, and we'll have more chat underneath here in the little box. Thank you very much, everybody, for keeping in touch. See you soon.